Hey you guys, it's Alexandra Christian. Welcome back to my channel. It is Saturday night and I'm sitting here in bed in my PJs and I thought tonight would be a great time to do a reading for you guys from my brand new book, Falling into Rhythm. Falling into Rhythm is a small town contemporary romance, very much in the vein of a Hallmark Channel seasonal romance. So if you like those kinds of stories, then you're most likely going to like Falling into Rhythm. It's the story of Harper Winslow, who is a sassy kindergarten teacher that nothing good and nothing interesting ever happens to. And then suddenly she finds her life turned upside down when her rock star idol moves to town with his adorable 5-year-old and they end up falling in love. Of course, because it's a romance. We love those happily ever afters, right? So I'm going to read chapter 7, and this part of the book, this takes place after they have already met, and they are already working on the fall carnival to benefit the school, the elementary school where Harper works. So let's get started. The first couple of weeks of school passed by so fast, as they always did. Hot summer days on the island quickly became crisp autumn mornings. The summer people had finally abandoned their cottages for the season, and the beaches were almost desolate. In Harper's yard, the leaves had already begun to turn so that the sun shone fiery shades of gold and red through the windows. It was Harper's favorite time of year. It always had been. She'd been raised in Crawford's Landing, and the wild sea was part of her soul. It was why she'd never left, despite her mother's urging. Her mother had raised Harper on her own after her father, a commercial fisherman, had been killed in a boating accident. Louise Winslow had pushed her daughter to excel in school and go to college so that she wouldn't have to end up cleaning hotel rooms for the rest of her life. And Harper had been an exceptional student. Everyone expected that she would go on to teach in the city or continue with graduate school. But Harper wasn't interested in that. She'd wanted to teach those kids like herself that felt trapped in such a tiny world. Now, sitting on 30, Harper had just assumed that everything would stay the same. She had gotten used to the idea of being an old maid schoolteacher who never had anything exciting happen to her. It wasn't that she was unhappy, far from it, but the thought that she would someday run off to some glamorous life became more of a ridiculous fantasy with every passing year. Then, just when she'd given up all hope for something more, in walked Jude Renfro. Now, as she sat here on her lumpy old sofa grading papers by the flickering of the television set, her mind wandered to Jude. Over the last couple of weeks, their exchanges had been brief and casual. In fact, she'd been actively avoiding him. Regardless of what Jackson Nicole might say, Harper doubted that a by-the-book woman like Andrea Nettles would look too kindly on Harper throwing herself at the parent of one of her students. The truth was, if Harper saw too much of Jude, the more she'd want to see him again, and then things would just get awkward. There was also the glaring reality that Jude was a musician. A retired musician, but a musician nonetheless, and those guys were not known for being what one might call reliable. If the tabloids could be believed, guys like Jude blew through relationships like a Carolina hurricane. They fell in and out of the beds of supermodels and actresses with alarming speed. It was more than likely that if Jude had any real interest in her at all, it was merely to have a warm body to fall on top of while he was stranded out here in the middle of nowhere. More importantly, Harper had fallen completely in love with Christopher, or Kit as he preferred. He was an exceptionally bright and kind child. His sensitivity and outgoing nature had won him over with the rest of the class. He was loved by all of them, and he loved them in turn. He hadn't had another episode of hesitation since the first morning, and was now walking into the classroom completely on his own. Every morning he greeted Harper and Jax with an infectious smile, and in the afternoons he hugged them as if it were the last time they'd see one another. Getting involved with Jude might jeopardize that special relationship she'd forged with the boy. Or maybe she was just scared. Harper sighed and threw her folder aside, startling her enormous tabby, Matthew. It figured that the perfect man with the perfect kid walked into her life, and she was too chicken shit to do anything about it. That had always been her problem. Harper didn't consider herself to be a great beauty. In fact, her mother, God rest her soul, had instilled a healthy dose of insecurity in Harper from an early age. 90 pounds is trouble, she remembered her mother saying when she stepped on the scale at barely 12 years old. Are you really going to wear that? Or, you have such a pretty face. That one was Harper's favorite, as if the rest of her was a dumpster fire. She never thought that she was wearing the right clothes. She couldn't ever get her hair to do what she wanted, so most days she just threw it up in a ponytail. Then there was her clumsiness, her loud, unladylike laughter, her near obsession with Star Wars, all of these things that made her feel awkward again around the opposite sex. Sure, she had dated a little bit, but nothing serious. All of this being said, she just couldn't get Jude Renfro out of her mind. It wasn't the way he looked. Okay, so it wasn't just the way he looked. It was more than that. Over the last few weeks, Harper had observed that Jude was intelligent and kind. He laughed easily and was loved by all the children. During their committee meetings, his excitement was infectious. He'd even managed to convince a few more parents and teachers to help them. He was just so awesome. "What is wrong with me?" she shouted, throwing herself against the back of the couch. How could she keep avoiding him when all she wanted to do was see his face? Her cell phone answered with an insistent buzz of an incoming text. Harper glanced over at the clock. It was nearly 10. Most of her friends didn't text this late on weeknights unless something was wrong. "Probably some kind of sales thing," she said, finishing off her glass of wine and resolving to leave it until morning. It buzzed again, scooting across the table until it nearly fell to the floor. Harper caught it, and the message notification flashed across the screen. Jude Renfro. Harper's heart fluttered. Her belly flipped over, and she could hear the blood rushing through her veins. Her hands trembled as her fingers swept over the screen to open the text message. "Are you awake?" Harper glanced over her shoulder as if she expected someone to pop out of the linen closet. Was Jude really texting her, or was this yet another of her shameful fantasies, brought on by too much wine and the tedium of grading papers? "Sure, I'm a teacher, not Amish." "Don't say anything disparaging about the Amish. I hear those guys know how to party." Harper giggled. Not only did he text in complete sentences, he used words like disparaging in normal conversation. "Did you need something, Mr. Renfro?" "For starters, for you to stop calling me Mr. Renfro. It makes me feel old." "If you're really concerned about feeling old, you'd stop texting in complete sentences, Mr. Renfro." "Touché, Miss Winslow." The butterflies in Harper's stomach made a hurried flight toward locales further south. She could just imagine the way his full lips formed the words, Miss Winslow. "I say again, what do you want?" Smiley face. Oh, dear Lord in heaven, had she really just sent a smiley face? "First, I think Kit left his hoodie on the playground." "I know he did. It's in my washing machine, even as we text." "You took it home?" "It was covered in mud." Now I really feel like a shitty father. I hate laundry. "No worries. So what was the second thing?" "I got a rental place to donate some of the things for the carnival." "Oh, wow, that's fantastic. What are they going to donate?" "They're sending me a catalog, and we can pick out a few things. The only catch is that we have to take things that aren't already rented for the day." "We can totally make that work." "Great. When can we get together to look at the catalog?" His words glowed bright blue on her phone. Harper rubbed her eyes, thinking that maybe her vision had blurred. Had he just asked her to go someplace? Together? Well? Oh, God, he was expecting her to answer. A million questions tumbled around in her brain, and all of those butterflies were slowly crawling up her throat. My classroom is being used by the after-school program tomorrow. Maybe the conference room?" "I was thinking outside of the school. There was a coffee shop downtown. How about there?" Before she could change her mind, Harper found herself typing "sure" into her phone. She hit send before she could change her mind. "Excellent. Is 4 o'clock good for you?" "I'll be there." Jude Renfro says, "See you soon." The tiny dots after his words continued to blink, indicating that he was typing something else. Harper watched them for a bit. They would blink for a couple of seconds, then go away, then blink, as if he were typing something, and then thought better of it. Finally, "Good night, Miss Winslow." Harper threw her phone down on the coffee table. She stared at the thing as if it might be a dangerous insect. Had she really just accepted a date with Jude Renfro? So, surely some kind of lust demon had taken over her brain and caused her to have a case of temporary insanity. He was the parent of one of her students, for heaven's sake. "No," she said to herself, "it isn't a date. We're working on this project together, so naturally we'll have to be together to make it work. It's perfectly innocent." Then why didn't she feel so innocent? She felt like the naughty lady of Shady Lane. Just texting with him about his child's hoodie felt like she was committing some immoral act. And then there were the heated fantasies she'd been having lately, daydreams that began with him picking her up from work in his shiny Jaguar and whisking her off to a glamorous weekend in Paris, and others that weren't so juvenile. Some that weren't juvenile at all. In fact, they were downright adult, and Harper knew that they were completely inappropriate daydreams to be having about a student's father. Harper threw her folder full of papers aside with a heavy sigh. Taking up the bottle of wine, she emptied it into her glass. "Bottoms up, Matthew," she said, then chugged the whole thing fast until dribbles of red wine slid down her chin. The cat twitched his tail as she slammed the glass down on the table. "Sorry," she mumbled, scratching him behind the ears. He offered a disapproving meow and jumped down. "No, I am not going to feel guilty about this," Harper said. She stood up and grabbed the empty wine bottle and glass. She was only slightly unsteady on her feet. Apparently finishing off a bottle of wine wasn't a good idea on a school night. Great, we can add drunkenness to my offenses as a kindergarten teacher. She wondered if Jude was sitting on his couch having the same thoughts. Likely not. In Harper's limited experience, men weren't programmed that way. Limited experience was a nice way of describing Harper's love life. All through high school, she dated Alan Wingate. He'd been a cute boy in the marching band with dark eyes and floppy hair that she'd known for most of her childhood on the island. He was her first boyfriend, her first kiss, and her first grown-up date in a car. They'd even gone to the prom together. Everyone assumed that they'd get married and raise a house full of chubby-cheeked kids with Harper's sparkling personality and Alan's talent for music. Then, the night of her graduation, Alan broke the news that not only did he not want to be Harper's boyfriend anymore, but that he had a boyfriend of his own. She remembered her friends being devastated on her behalf, but Harper didn't really mind. Alan had been a childish habit that she'd been putting off breaking for quite a while. Not to mention that Harper was always happy to see others finally being able to live their truth and bore him no ill will. She particularly delighted in seeing the pictures of Alan and his partner on social media, living happily in Charleston with their Boykin Spaniel and an adorable toddler. Then, in college, there had been Rain. Actually, his name was George, but he insisted that everyone call him Rain. He'd been so beautiful with his long, inky, blue-black hair and violet contacts. He was an English major that frequently hung out at the local coffee shop, a long clove cigarette perched between his fingertips, as he wrote sad poetry about dead leaves and heartbreak. Harper had admired him from afar for the entire fall semester until, finally, getting up the courage to approach him. To her surprise, he'd accepted, and the two of them began a fiery affair that lasted nearly 2 years. Rain had taught her everything about love and sex. Everything about their relationship had been intense. Then suddenly, for no reason at all, it ended. 1 minute he was there, the next minute he was gone. Again, Harper wasn't bitter. Looking back on it now, she realized that she was far better for having known him. But that was it. Beyond those two men on the opposite ends of the male spectrum, Harper had never had another long-term relationship. Sure, she had her fair share of dates, but in the end, they fizzled out. None of them ignited that passion she craved. "This is ridiculous," she said to Matthew, who sat at her feet, cleaning his paws. "I barely even know this guy." It was true. She knew nothing about Jude Renfro, except what she'd read in the tabloids years ago. What was his favorite color? His favorite meal? His middle name? These were questions that one should know about a person before becoming romantically involved. Not that she was anywhere close to being romantically involved with Jude. It was just a cup of coffee and carnival planning. What could possibly be the harm in that? Well, as in most romance novels, she finds out there's quite a bit of harm in that, but it's good harm, so that's okay. If you are interested in this book, it comes out on September the 15th, but it is up for pre-order right now on Amazon, so I will link it down in the comments so that you can rush out and get your copy as soon as you click off of this video. But I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye!